They didn't conquer with swords, they conquered with ledgers. For over a century, one family of bankers pulled the strings of popes, kings, and entire nations without ever wearing a crown. Their weapon wasn't armies, it was credit, the invisible chain that bound rulers to their will. And the debt they collected was never just gold. It was obedience, it was influence, it was a leash fastened to the necks of kings. Florence was a city of merchants, but one family saw that the real power wasn't in the goods, it was in the gold behind them. At the head of the family was Giovanni di Medici, not a warrior, not a nobleman, but a man with a talent for making others depend on him. While rival bankers flaunted wealth, Giovanni did the opposite. He dressed modestly, avoided arrogance, and built relationships that would outlast fortunes. His most powerful tool? Loans to those no one else would touch. Rulers with empty treasuries, merchants on the edge of collapse. He would extend credit when others slammed their doors. But repayment was never just in coin. It came in favors, influence, and access. By the 1420s, the Medici Bank was spreading quietly across Europe. London, Bruges, Venice, Rome. Not just moving money, moving loyalty. Every branch was more than a place to store gold. It was an outpost of influence, with Medici men embedded in the politics of every city they entered. Florence saw them as mere bankers, but Giovanni saw something else. He wasn't just lending money, he was buying the future, one ledger at a time. In politics, there is power, but in religion, there is obedience, and the Medici were about to own both. The breakthrough came when the papal treasury was in chaos. Wars, corruption, and poor accounting had left the Vatican drowning in debt. Giovanni de' Medici saw an opportunity, not just to lend, but to become indispensable. He offered a deal. The Medici Bank would manage the Vatican's finances, collect taxes, and supply credit whenever the Pope needed it. In return, the Pope would grant them exclusive control of the Church's money. With one agreement, the Medici didn't just become rich, they became the Pope's personal bankers. From that moment, every indulgence sold, every tithe collected, every war funded by the Vatican passed through Medici hands. The Church's reach extended across Christendom, which meant so did the Medicis. Kings who wanted papal favor came to the Vatican, and the Vatican came to the Medici. When a monarch needed a war blessed, a marriage annulled, or an enemy excommunicated, the cost was paid in gold, and that gold was counted in Florence. Cosimo, Giovanni's son, saw the true scale of what they'd built. They weren't just merchants anymore. They were kingmakers, and unlike kings, they couldn't be toppled by a sword. No one could invade a ledger. No army could storm a balance sheet. With the Pope's seal on their accounts, the Medici could move money across borders faster than any army could march. And money was the one army every ruler needed. Cosimo didn't need a crown to rule Florence. He owned the men who wore them. The Medici method was simple and unstoppable. 1. Fund your friends into power. 2. Make your enemies owe you more than they can repay. 3. Control the state without ever appearing to lead it. When a political rival rose too high, Cosimo cut off their credit, bankrupting them without lifting a sword. When an ally needed help, the Medici Bank opened its vaults. Every loan tightened the leash. Florence was still a republic, on paper, but in reality, every guild, every merchant, every artist owed something to the Medicis. And beyond Florence, their influence spread. Medici gold crowned 2 popes, Pope Leo X, born Giovanni de' Medici, Pope Clement VII, Cosimo's descendant. They didn't just serve the church, they were the church. Medici daughters married into Europe's royal families. One became Catherine de' Medici, Queen of France, and one of the most feared political figures of the Renaissance. Another, Marie de' Medici, followed the same path decades later. By the 16th century, the family name wasn't just in the ledgers. It was written into royal bloodlines. Through marriage, religion, and finance, the Medicis had achieved what no army could. They ruled kingdoms without conquering them. a century, the Medici had been untouchable, but no dynasty is beyond envy or beyond overreach. Decades of expansion had stretched the Medici Bank thin. Risky foreign loans, political bribes, lavish spending on art and palaces. Even their papal connections couldn't protect them from the shifting tides of Florence. A fiery preacher named Savonarola rose to power, railing against corruption, greed, and the Medici's grip on the city. He called them merchants of sin, blaming their wealth for Florence's moral decay. In 1494, the French invaded Italy. The Medicis, politically isolated and deeply unpopular, were forced into exile. Their palaces were looted, their art seized. The family that once financed kings was now begging for shelter in foreign courts. The bank collapsed soon after. Centuries of dominance, undone not by war, but by debt and resentment. Yet even in exile, the Medicis never lost their most dangerous asset, patience. They waited, they married into new alliances, they leveraged old debts, and eventually they returned. They learned that money can buy a throne, but keeping it requires more than gold. The Medici Empire began with ink on a ledger. It ended with their palaces silent and their vaults empty. But their true wealth was never gold. It was the network they built, the web of loyalty, favors, and bloodlines that survived long after the bank was gone. Centuries later, their name is still carved into the walls of Europe's history, not because they conquered, but because they understood the mathematics of power. Money is influence, influence is control, and control can outlive the hand that holds it. The Medicis proved you don't have to wear a crown to own the man who does, and in time, they rose higher than kings. Through careful marriages, they tied themselves to the thrones of France, Spain, and the Holy Roman Empire. Catherine de' Medici became Queen of France. Marie de' Medici, too, sat on the same throne decades later. From bankers, they became monarchs themselves, without ever fighting a war. Their empire shifted, no longer ledgers and loans, but bloodlines and crowns, not interest rates, but dynasties. And though their bank rotted, their influence only deepened. Gold can be stolen, palaces can burn, empires can fall, but power that flows through networks, debts, alliances, bloodlines cannot be erased. It lingers, it mutates, it reappears centuries later in ways no army can predict. History is not written by the loudest voices, but by those who acted quietly, strategically, and could not be ignored. Strivor, we tell the stories history tried to bury, and power never forgets.